Yeah, I think you can do it either way, but.
All right.
All right. Welcome to another installment of the Purple Team. Second book of the year. We're talking about Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. The subtitle is Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants, which pretty much sums up the entire book. Robin Kimmerer is part of the Potawatomi tribe. There's also another subgroup of native peoples.
Right.
That I couldn't exactly pronounce. But it's good. So she's an ecologist. She has a master's degree or maybe a PhD.
Haudenosaunee,
Yeah, something like that. There's a couple of them and I don't know how.
she lives in
All
that
that works.
area.
Oh, I was thinking of Ojibwe. That was the
Oh,
language
the
when she was learning the
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's this, so she grew up in the culture and she talks, some about the stealing of native children and indoctrinating them in boarding schools. And prohibiting them to learn the language of their own people, and learning the ways and so there's a lot of that conversation and dialogue between this kind of indigenous wisdom of how the world works and the kind of Western white man wisdom of more quote book academia versus nature academia. And so that's what the indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge is, those kind of two different things. And then her whole thing is like plants and nature are the biggest teachers, right? So there's also points where she's trying to teach and she realizes she's failing. But she takes students out on these trips and they're still learning. It's like, oh yes, even when I fail as a teacher, nature's still.
Why did I not have these kind of teachers taking me out into the woods and
Oh my gosh.
I did not love any science class. I guess I kind of liked physics, but most of my science classes I did not enjoy. But I think if she had been my teacher and, drugged me out into the marsh, she has these like, into the wetlands and into the forest and all these incredible, almost like survival trips, with these students.
Yeah, they built wigwams.
Yeah, that's right. And they like take their cell phones out and trying to look for a signal and all that stuff. So I'm sorry, I interrupted, but
Yeah.
I just wish I had her as a teacher.
It's good because it's similar to the other books we've read in that there's kind of a thin narrative through it, but like you can really pick up any chapter and read it independently. So with that, I guess I'll leave it open to like what other, specific chapters spoke to you most, or what conversation you want to start with.
She referenced any religious feelings or bent?
She does. Well, and that's an interesting one, right? Like it's religion, yes, as in like it does, I mean, she doesn't really mention like Christianity or kind of that sort of thing, but she talks in the sense of the creator, right? And the idea that she talks a lot about the native or indigenous origin stories and that sort of thing. And, it's one of those, like, they're different, but also very similar, right? That the idea that the creator gave us rules to follow. When we don't follow them, things get messed up. The interesting one I thought was a time where the first man, I can't remember what his name was. But so everyone's doing what the creator tells him and everything, and he goes on this trip and he comes back and people are lazy and just sitting under maple trees, just drinking the syrup. And she said syrup, and as punishment, he takes jugs of water and pours it into the trees. And so it's like, now you have to work to get syrup. Right, and so we have to boil it down,
Has
like
to be boiled.
the idea that it used to be that syrup just flowed through from the trees, and now you have to Now you have to go through a process because,
This was an-
because you were lazy.
The beginning of some beginning man,
Yeah.
kind of a
Yeah.
Jesus reference, would you say?
No, more of an Adam
More of an
reference.
Adam reference,
Adam
yeah,
reference.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, she references some religious language that's not. That is not very positive, doesn't put Christianity in a positive light,
No.
just in terms of that a lot of the schools. That kind of, try to re-indoctrinate these students or these children. Were run by Christian missionaries and were told, you gotta, well, what's the phrase? You got to kill the Indian and keep the man, or save the man, or something like that, right? And so
Yikes.
removing anything that was
Yeah.
considered indigenous, is a kind of conversionary. And so, yeah, if there's religious stuff happening, it's not always in a positive light, yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
washing their mouths out with soap for using their
If
native
they use the
language
native language, right,
was
they
pretty
take
vivid.
their braid and they cut their braids off when they come. Yeah.
British did that to the Aborigines down in
Mhm.
Australia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, you asked for, if there were chapters that spoke to us. And there were two that really spoke to me. One was the grammar of animacy.
Grammar,
Which-
what?
The grammar of animacy, meaning animacy being animate versus inanimate
Yeah.
things, beings.
I brought that up in the two-way, Chuck. That was in my first draft. Well, that was in my final draft of the sermon. I just ran out of time to finish the sermon. But yeah,
Right,
talk
right.
more about that.
Well, the part that you quoted, which is that there was, there are so many more verbs in their native language.
Mhm.
70%
Yeah.
of their words are verbs.
Mhm.
Oh, Dava's coming. Yay. Hi, Dava. Versus, I think it was 30%.
it was the
wasn't-
inverse.
The inverse,
Yeah.
right?
Right, 30% verbs.
Yeah, Potawatomi has 70% verbs and 30% nouns, and English has 70% nouns and 30% verbs.
verbs.
Mhm. And her point being that becomes then kind of the language of possession, right?
Right.
Everything's an it, everything's a thing that can be possessed.
Right, or
As opposed-
conquered
or conquered, right?
yeah.
As opposed to the verb of to be an apple, right? Or what did she say, to be a bay?
Right, to be
Right?
a
There's a
bay.
verb to be a bay, right? And her point is that if a bay is a thing, then you can dump, toxic waste in it, because it's a thing for you to do something
Right.
with, right?
Right,
But if
yeah.
it's
If it's a being.
if it's a
if it
being, right.
be something,
Mhm,
yeah,
right.
that makes a big
It's a
difference.
different way, yeah.
Right, it's a
Yeah.
different way of thinking about it. I thought about that in our language. There's kind of a way to do that, but it's not the same still.
Yeah.
We add the suffix NESS to some things, like we
Oh.
would say, this has a certain bayness to it.
Appleness,
Or
yeah,
an
yeah.
appleness and a quality of being an apple rather than a
Huh.
being.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's still not quite the same. It's
Right.
still,
Yeah.
I looked it up and I think it takes a verb and makes it into a noun, is what it does in our
Mm,
language,
mm,
adding the NESS.
Yeah.
Which is opposite, actually, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, the interesting part is that's English, but the point that I was, if I had more time to make in the sermon. Was that Hebrew is much more like Potawatomi, that there is kind of an animism to it in terms of. Especially when it becomes more poetic, right? I mean, it's hard to tell if this was actually the language itself or just the.
The written,
Yeah, kind of the way it's written, the poetic.
yeah.
But absolutely in the text from Leviticus, I talked about this in the two-way too, that there's this phrase that says the land will have its Sabbath, or the land will enjoy its Sabbath. And the point being that it'll either enjoy its Sabbath
With or without.
With or without you, right? When humans are taken off of it because you didn't do your job, the land will enjoy its Sabbath. Or you can do your job and together you will enjoy your Sabbath. But that kind of personification of the land is not unlike what I think she's trying to say.
Yeah, right, there's definitely parallels there.
Yeah.
And then the paragraph on page 56 that talks about the word YAWE in their language, which is the animate to be, and how similar that is to the Old Testament word Yahweh.
Oh, yeah, I am, right.
Right, that's what
So-
God says.
And how worlds
That's right.
apart, those two words
Yeah,
came into existence.
Cultures apart.
yeah, right.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's the thing I liked about the American Indian,
Mhm,
is they weren't encumbered with our religious
mhm,
understanding of reading what we call scriptures.
yeah.
Their scriptures was and is the grass,
The
the
land,
animals, the
right,
buffalo,
yeah, that's right,
trees,
yep.
and the land gets its rest, you said in Leviticus?
Mhm.
That would indicate.
The land will
that
enjoy
to
its
have
Sabbath.
rest, it has to
Mhm.
be alive
That's right, yeah.
to need rest.
Well, you said cultures apart, but I would push back on that in the sense that both of these are much more ancient cultures, and so they're much more related to each
Mhm.
other than even us, and like, we're so far removed time-wise that we've evolved and developed, not necessarily like up, but just changed, right, enough to be so far removed, but because they're so ancient, we all came from one culture anyway, like that they're much more in common because they're closer to the original, like the original.
Mhm.
And they've carried that culture forward.
Right, and they've kept it pure,
Yeah, yeah.
or tried to as much
Yeah.
as they.
Well, yeah, I mean, I haven't kept up with my reading too well, but it has overlapped with the season of creation stuff, right? And it's not that unlike Genesis, right? It's not that unlike Job. The stuff that we've been talking about in worship, that it does have a commonness in terms of the kind of the definitely in terms of the poetic nature of it, to say that this truth is best carried not with, very specific details, but with stories about people and animals and plants and so on and so forth. And there's a similarity there, yeah.
Another chapter that I enjoyed was talking about, so so it's called Braiding Sweetgrass, and each section is like sectioned off into a different stage of grass, right? It's like growing grass, cutting grass, weaving, braiding, and then I think burning at the end, right?
Mhm.
But
In their interactions.
so that there's that kind of weavingness through, but there's one section where they're talking about harvesting it. That she talked with one group of an indigenous culture, and they don't, they only pick the leaves or the
Right.
like, right, which is they leave the stem, right, cause you have to have it keep growing.
Mhm.
Don't pick the plant because then you're killing it. And another group says, oh yeah, you can, we just pick the whole plant.
Pull it up. back
Right.
to its-
But the commonality between them is they only do half. Like their idea is like only pick and only harvest half, right? And so this lady was, not Robin, but a student wanted to do a dissertation
Lori.
on, yes,
Yeah.
on which process produces a better yield. She goes to the board, of course, you have to get it approved, and you're like, this is ridiculous, everybody knows that harvesting something does not increase your yield, like that's. Picking, how can that be, that's a dumb way of doing it.
Yeah.
So she revised it, and she said, no, I'm gonna do it, she did it, and she. I mean, it took like 2 years to do, or 3 years, right? She did it right. And she, had this whole thing of, she was pregnant while she did it, and she was, meticulously taking notes and picking things and doing all this stuff. It came up that like, it actually, and of course she had a, control group that they did nothing with. And what she found was, regardless of whether you pick the whole plant or just, bits of it, yielded about the same, but it still did better than the control group of not. And so this idea that,
Not doing anything.
and it helps with sustainability, like that we shouldn't just do nothing, right? That doesn't help,
Right.
right? It's how do you, and this whole thing is like, you take care of the land and land takes care of you. And this reciprocity.
Yeah.
But this idea that, because what happens is you take out stuff and it's not overburdened, right? And so other plants can flourish because they're not having to compete with the neighbor, right? And so,
Yeah, and she makes connections to the buffalo that eat some of the grass, as long as they keep moving, right?
right,
As long as, some of it gets harvested, not, completely, blasted out, right?
Right,
If
right.
if plants get over harvested, then they won't survive. If they get under harvested, they won't flourish.
but yeah, that was one chapter that stood out to me.
Mhm.
And I think that we can apply that now, right? Like, oh, well, it's not like we shouldn't do anything. It's like, no, we still have a job to take care of the earth by harvesting certain things, like we still have to eat.
Right,
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 just
right,
to pick
right.
things.
Right.
It's just do it out of gratitude and
Mhm.
the knowledge of what,
Yeah.
what the creation is giving you. And what it's telling you to leave.
Yeah, what's the? Oh, you asked which section that I was struck by, and these are my little bend down marks, you can't see it across the
The little
room.
dog
Like,
ears.
It's basically
Oh, wow.
every other page.
Or every,
Oh, my goodness.
something from every chapter. probably.
Right, I was like, okay, I cannot underline this whole book.
I know.
Just
I'm glad I
stop.
didn't start with a pencil. I didn't even
That's
start.
Probably smart,
Because
'cause
I
I
thought,
did,
let me
and-
just,
Oof.
it makes it a little bit harder to find things, but,
Mhm.
Yeah, I
but
started making little notes in the margins to remind myself.
yeah. Oh, but then the Thanksgiving address
Yes,
and what's the
Yeah.
other one? The rules of gratitude. What is that one? What's that
oh,
called?
that's close to the front.
Is it closer there?
Was after,
At least I thought it was.
Mark those two.
was it after the Three Sisters?
Oh, that was a good chapter
That was a
too.
good chapter too.
I thought it was before the Three Sisters, but
I think.
It's before the Three Sisters.
Okay,
Allegiance of Gratitude
Thanks,
105.
105.
Oh, the other one though is on 175, the honorable harvest.
Ooh, I'm not there yet.
That is
I'm
on
almost there.
183. The
Okay.
rules for the guidelines for the honorable harvest.
Yeah, that was the other one.
Okay, yeah,
I referenced it in the
Yeah.
838 service,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yep.
not written down.
Well, in Genesis, it said God made man, he put him in the garden to take care of it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, here are the guidelines for the honorable harvest. I'll read those out loud. Know the ways of the ones who take care of you so that you may take care of them. Introduce yourself, be accountable as the one who comes asking for life. Ask permission before taking, abide by the answer. Never take the first, never take the last. Take only what you need. Take only that which is given. Never take more than half, leave some for others. Harvest in a way that minimizes harm. Use it respectfully, never waste what you have taken. Share. Give thanks for what you have been given. Give a gift in reciprocity for what you have taken. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will last forever. I mean, it's not that explicit in Genesis, but I imagine this could be Adam's credo, right? And I think this is kind of what God commanded Adam to
Yeah.
do with all of the creatures. naming creatures and speaking to them and naming the species and caring for the plants and it's
like stewardship.
yeah, right, yeah. Yeah,
I mean, there's the word dominion, but it seems like dominion is more stewardship.
it is, yeah. Well,
Right.
we've kind of, in English, it's a lot closer to domination than it is in Hebrew.
Yeah.
In Hebrew, that's not really what it's saying. It's saying something more like stewardship.
We treat it a lot more like domination.
Were you gonna say something, David?
Sure. There were two parts that I'm not finished with the book, but there were two parts thus far that have really resonated with me, and that was the characteristics of a leader. And I don't remember where that's at. I'm listening to it, I'm not reading it, so I don't have the book to dog ear things in it. And the three sisters, the companion. I've been, we just bought property and I'm going to be doing a big garden. And so I've been doing a lot of research on that companion gardening.
Yes.
Things that help each other out for bug infestations and for fertilizing and for all the different things in the soil, the nitrates and the oxygen and all that kind of stuff. And so that companion planting, I mean, when you think about people and how we can be companions for each other and helping each other by and multiple different ways when you look at the three sisters, how they help each other out in their area of their growth.
Right. Do you all know the three sisters? You know that? So three sisters are, you're supposed to plant together corn, which comes up first and gets tall, and then pole beans, which starts to kind of, go around the corn, and begins to, what is it? I was thinking a lot about the tree book about fixing the nitrogen.
Right.
And it kind of, it is a natural fertilizer, right? So it becomes a fertilizer and then, squash or pumpkins, because that kind of, it becomes a natural, like you say, it becomes a natural weed suppressant. And it kind of covers the ground all around it and keeps extra weeds from popping up.
Holds moisture in.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you plant the three of them together in a mound, and then they become, and then you do that all over the field, as opposed to a whole field of corn next to a whole field of beans, next to a whole field of pumpkins.
Right.
Which don't take advantage. Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to make
No,
sure.
that's okay. Yeah, well, it talked about the different nutrients that each of those supply for the body,
Yeah,
and you have to have all three of them to have a complete diet. And I just think about people in our lives and the way we work together in different groups and all that kind of stuff, and that just kind of resonated with me.
no,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. You'll have to keep us in the loop if you end up doing the Three Sisters planting out at your place. That would be so
I'm not
cool.
planting corn.
Right.
I'm not planting on planting corn, but yeah, the companion planting, there's a lot of different things on companion planting of what saps from what, takes from the soil and what gives to the soil.
Yeah.
And so that you have a better crop, but we'll see.
Yeah. That's great. It'd be cool to take the youth out there just to show them kind of this is what this looks like and this is
Yeah.
how those.
Yeah, well, it'll be a couple of years before that's in place.
It'll be the current children, will be in the youth group.
Yeah.
Well, many years ago, we used to throw pumpkin seeds in the corn
Oh,
box when we planted corn.
yeah.
And in the fall, you'd find these pumpkins in the field.
Huh.
We didn't plant pole beans with it, but in the gardens, way back when, the gardeners would, in the small gardens, you
Yeah.
could have your sweet corn and they would have pole beans planted by the sweet corn and it would climb up the corn.
Oh,
That's,
yeah.
that's it.
And so it had a place to climb.
Right, yeah.
Pole beans need some place to climb. So you could have ear corn and you could have beans,
Yeah,
but the pumpkins, I remember picking.
pumpkins out of the old, the
Pumpkins
cornfield.
have to stop. So they wouldn't crush them, while it's picking corn.
Uh-huh. Huh,
Was it in the same chapter or a different chapter where they talked about the feast? Where they had the Three Sisters feast?
oh, yes,
She invited.
That, I think that was in the same chapter, or the very next chapter,
yeah.
because
no,
they
I-
were talking about the pole beans put nitrogen into the ground, which is what the corn needs to grow, and the pumpkin helps retain the water. But then they were talking about the nutrients of those three items for your body, and they were talking about the feast. So they have the pumpkin and the corn and the green beans and
Cornbread. That's
yeah,
right.
and the cornbread and all that kind of stuff. And I was just visualizing those tables, and those three items together, the colors of those three items together are phenomenal and very eye-catching, and so which is pleasing to your eyes, and which then pleases your taste buds too. But I don't know. I was just
Pumpkin pie, you mean?
I was just thinking maybe that's our next, I don't know, blue team,
Orange
Orange team.
orange team meal.
Through a lot of this, I was thinking about Brandon and, his Kernza and,
Yes.
some of the same overlapping, concepts, right? Dave, on, Sunday night, Brandon, for the agape meal for, the orange team, Brandon did, well, it was tacos, but it was, foods off of the Future 50 list, so, more sustainable foods. And so we had yucca and,
I love yucca.
and jicama, jicama
Mhm.
fries, yucca with, hatch chilies and onions. And then he made flatbread with black beans, and then he made flatbread with kernza. Do you know kernza?
No, that I don't know. Everything else you've said I know, but
Yeah.
Kernza is a perennial wheat. So instead of an annual where you throw out winter wheat every year and you take it all out, it's a perennial, so it keeps growing back. And so it's got these big, long root systems. And it continues you continue to harvest it. And so, yeah, he found some Kernza, I guess it was pancake mix, but he's like, so I just turned it into flatbread. But yeah,
It was sweet, but.
it was a little
you know,
sweet, but it was
was
great,
good.
so.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's a lot of that same overlap in terms of
yeah.
how the foods that we grow and the foods that we eat are, I mean, she talks about kind of the monoculture stuff and about, that these plants weren't designed to have acre upon acre upon acre of one species. And then acre upon acre of another species next to each other, right? And so there's some kind of learning there.
I have a tangent, off of that. So John and I have been watching this show, Clarkson's Farm. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Heard of that one.
Clarkson is, I can't remember his first name. He used to be in a car show where, I mean, they would like test drive all of these really racy sports
Uh-huh.
cars. But he came into ownership of this farm.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
England.
It's Top Gear.
The Top Gear, I was wondering
Yeah,
that's what it was, yeah.
It's the salty guy from Top Gear.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
it is hilarious.
And this is hilarious too, but so good. I've got to think for what it has done to reveal the plight of the farmer, to the masses. But in one of the episodes, he decides to try something called renewables, or let me see. I looked it up.
Yeah, did he inherit it, or did he just decide to buy the farm? So he just buys his farm and
I
says,
think he
mildly
inherited
doesn't
it.
know what's
He
going
doesn't have a
on.
clue.
Yeah.
He's a
Like,
gearhead.
He so does not have a clue. He buys a Lamborghini tractor.
I didn't know you could buy one of
No,
those.
Lamborghini started making tractors.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I thought I had found
Oh,
it,
Ethan.
but I think it was, I think it is called renewable farming, but they plant wheat and beans together.
Oh, yeah,
And
okay.
then they sort it all out after the fact. So,
Wow.
you know, and the guy that he's hired who really knows how to farm, who puts up with all of his shenanigans.
Yeah.
And he's like, this is never gonna work. He's like, you need chemicals and you need this
Yeah,
and you need
yeah,
that.
yeah,
And, but they point out that it's not organic farming. They test it frequently
yeah. Uh-huh.
to see what it needs, and then they just give it.
Oh,
it
instead of just
needs.
crop dusting the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What did you call that, David? Companion farming?
Yeah.
Companion farming,
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Yes, it is companion farming, or companion planting. Because there are plants that feed each other. And so instead of using fertilizers or pesticides, there are plants that help do those things if you're planting them together.
like the
So we'll
beans are
see.
for the corn.
Right,
and-
right, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
The other section we briefly talked about was the allegiance of gratitude.
All right.
It's similar to the. No, it's not. It starts out with, you know, in the idea that, talks about, you know, the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, right, yes.
And it's her
daughter.
kids are,
Yeah.
going to school and be like, I'm not saying this is down, why would I pledge allegiance to a
Mm,
flag that,
yeah,
you know, doesn't actually give liberty and justice for all? And they said, well, they have their own, and it's more of a prayer of gratitude, right? And it's a thank you prayer. And it starts, I mean, talking about creation, it starts with the wind and the larger things,
Yes,
and it gets
yes.
down to,
it's like the order of
you know, it's,
Genesis 1, yeah.
you know, and people listen in, and you can tell that people, you know, that haven't heard before, they're like, you know, opening their eyes, looking around.
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
like really
thinking,
long.
Cause it is
yeah,
super long, and people are like, oh my gosh, you have to do this all the time, and it's like, no, like, look at all the things we are thankful for.
yeah. Uh-huh,
Like, it's a
Yeah.
blessing to be able to say this long thing.
yeah, yeah.
And of course, you know, it's like the, what am I thinking of? Anyway, there's different versions of it, you
Right,
know,
yeah.
but it's, I don't know, that section was good. I will read a section of it.
Mhm.
See here. Oh, yeah, and it's hilarious because sometimes the kids say it, and so it's, you know, these little, you know, 6 or 7-year-olds trying
Uh-huh.
to recite it, and, you know, they're.
Yeah, like the whole essay like
following
weaves
along.
together this the whole
Yeah.
thing, so.
It starts, today we have gathered, and when we look upon faces around us, we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. Now let us bring our minds together as one, as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are one. And that, now our minds are one ends each kind
Yeah.
of stanza.
Yeah.
We are thankful to our Mother Earth, for she gives us everything that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk about upon her. It gives us joy that she still continues to care for us, just as she has from the beginning of time. To our mother, we send thanksgiving, love, and respect. Now our minds are one. It goes through, you know, give thanks to the waters of the world, the fish of the sea, the plants and life, berries, food plants, mentions the 3 sisters, medicinal herbs. And it continues, trees, birds. The wind.
Yeah, I really like the fact that it talked about now our minds are one.
Yeah.
Because it's giving life to all those things that we call things. We call it. We give it a noun, but it's giving a life to all of those. And that they have not necessarily feelings and thoughts and all that kind of stuff, but they have a life and a
Yeah.
purpose, and it's giving credence to that.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I remember the point was made during COVID that, we're all scattered and we all have these kind of different ideologies but then it took a little virus to kind of all get us to be singularly focused on the thing. But then it lasted about 10 minutes and we were scattered and fighting over masks and we were, angry at each other about stuff all over again. And I like the point of if you begin, like you say, Dave, if you begin with this gratitude, our minds are one, kind of as a pledge to begin the day. To say it's again, this natural thing, not like a virus, but a natural thing that pulls us together. If you say that more consistently, then maybe you believe it eventually.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's putting our minds in one with the earth and with the plants and with the, not necessarily with the other people that are around you, but with those it's.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
Those things we call nouns
right.
that really should be verbs.
I like the section of that same chapter where
Dave's out.
She'll be back.
she'll be back.
Yeah.
I like the part of that same chapter that talked about, that group of people, the Haudenosaunee, which is,
Yeah.
being known for centuries as masters of negotiation and for their diplomacy.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That's the native word for Iroquois, what we call Iroquois.
Oh,
Right?
really?
I think that she was talking about the Iroquois nation in that same chapter.
Okay,
But that is they don't call themselves Iroquois, that's what
they call
yeah,
themselves.
what is it, Haudenosaunee?
Haudenosaunee, Haudenosaunee.
Yeah.
And the words so it says, most everyone knows the tension that squeezes your jaw before a difficult conversation or a meeting. And then, you straighten your pile of papers more than once while the arguments you've prepared stand at attention like soldiers in your throat, ready to be deployed. But then the words that come before all else begin to flow and you start to answer. Yes, of course we can agree that we're grateful for Mother Earth. Yes, the same sun shines on each and every one of us. Yes, we're united in our respect for the trees. And it goes on. A decision is made only when this part, not surprisingly, Haudenosaunee decision-making proceeds from consensus, not by a vote of the majority. The decision is made only when our minds are one.
Yeah.
What if our leaders first found common ground before fighting over their differences?
That would be nice.
Would be nice. But that also wouldn't sell a news program.
That's
as
right,
well.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole idea of consumerism versus gratitude.
Right. Yeah, she takes aim, I said she took aim at Christianity. I think she takes aim at specifically kind of a European or Americanized Christianity in particular, kind of a colonial Christianity, much, she doesn't necessarily do what we may do and kind of dig deeper into some of the, ways that the Bible does teach a lot of this stuff and, and kind of a different spirituality than is often portrayed. But yeah, she definitely, pushes back on a lot of that colonizing and commercializing and industrializing and, greed centric culture a lot of us have grown up with.
Right. That we don't think back to what the source of it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, the chapter about the duck pond.
I was about to say, yeah.
Did yeah, that one, and that's a chapter about kind of this property that she bought with her daughters and kind of this idea of I'm gonna make this duck pond,
Yes. Oh, I
right?
did read
I've gotta
that.
make this duck
Yes.
pond swimmable.
Oh, yeah, like a
and
promise. It
A
was one of
promise
the
to, yes, I
promises to
promise I'm gonna
daughters.
make, this a swimmable pond.
Mhm.
And it talks about, it takes her years to kind of dredge out all this stuff and try to get
The
the
moss.
Like
the
different
moss out of it, the
methods,
algae out of it, all this stuff.
Mhm.
But really, it's a beautiful picture of mothering.
Uh-huh.
And and sending your children out into the world. I don't know, if I didn't have a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old right now, I may not have been quite so emotionally caught up in the chapter, but.
Did she
Oh,
have
yeah.
the way the pond was fed with fresh water?
Yeah, it was a spring-fed pond,
So it
but
did have fresh water coming into it.
but it was so overgrown over the years, and that it just, it took literally just, years and years of dragging out algae and trying to replant things that would help clean out the, and then,
Trimming out willows.
yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah, I thought of.
The
I thought
pond
of
was
Kate.
dying. I mean, we used to have ponds on the
Yeah,
farm. Of
that's what
course,
she
they were
said, yeah.
spring fed, they were rain fed, but they would die
Uh-huh,
if you let the algae and the reeds grow in them.
Yep, yep,
Of course,
that's
when
what
they
she
died,
said.
the fish would die,
yeah.
Mhm.
but rivers die
Hmm.
and oceans can die.
Oh.
We haven't killed them yet, but we're on the way.
Oh my goodness, I don't know if anybody else has made it to how far are you, David?
I'm a little over halfway.
The part about the lake in upstate New York,
Uh,
have you all read that one?
No.
I
The
read
state-
kind
the
of an
sacred-
introduction to it,
the
I
sacred
think.
and
yeah, that she's not helping cleaning it up. Is that the one you're talking about?
She kind
No,
of
No,
alluded to it earlier on, but. it
maybe
sounds
she
like
alluded
there's
to it
another
earlier, yeah, there's a whole
chapter.
Yeah.
chapter. The sacred and the superfund, about,
Yeah, I haven't got that far.
Yeah.
the Onondaga, people.
Right.
Something about that.
That's at 311, 310. And it's, I mean, just talked about Chuck, it's just very heartbreaking in terms of what we did,
Yeah,
what industrial, companies did to this. Basically just use this beautiful pristine lake as a dumping ground for all these chemicals and such. And so they tried to fix it and they just basically just kind of fancy it up a little bit, but.
We were in Cairo, and the Nile goes to Cairo.
Mhm.
We were on a bus going through there and I said, well, this is awful. They just dumped this.
Yeah.
All the trash out in the road here, out in the street. Yeah, and the guy says, that's a river. That's the Nile River.
Yeah,
And it just looked like a
the
total
road, yeah,
dump,
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
miles.
Yeah.
I said, they need a giant flood to flush it out. Then it would go to the ocean, which.
Well, true, that's right, yeah.
You're right, didn't I? Yeah,
Yeah.
Mediterranean.
She started talking about that in the chapter about the pond. I think because she was
Oh.
talking about accountability, like she was working on her own stuff,
Uh-huh,
but yet going on and to the wider world, as a mother.
oh.
Like the circles,
Oh,
like
right.
the progression of a woman's life and how the phases, you become a mother, you become you care for your children and all that's around you, but then after they're gone, you go on to care for the wider community.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
right, that's right, she didn't mention that. It was vaguely familiar when I got to the chapter, I couldn't remember why, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
Well,
'cause she- I think
you
she
know,
was-
that whole chapter where she's cleaning that pond, her own pond, you talk about motherhood and, she had made that promise and she wasn't able to keep that promise to her children and she reevaluated and that pond will be swimmable for her grandchildren.
Grandchildren, I know.
And so, what we do necessarily isn't immediate. It
Right.
may be long-term before we see the effects of what we're doing.
Right. Yeah, I imagine you were living there too, David, with, where you are these days with grandkids coming out to the new property and.
Yeah.
some of this, yeah.
But that's, I think, our problem, right? It's not just this idea, it's not just a self-centered of, I can take it, and therefore I'm going to.
Yeah,
But like, if I'm gonna fix it, I'm not gonna fix it if I'm not gonna be able to reap the rewards of it.
yeah.
So why,
Right, yeah,
right?
Right.
And it's like,
Right.
it's the idea also of bonsai trees.
huh,
Like, in order to do a bonsai, it takes like 100 years or something. Like, it's one of those things of like, you start it so that your kids can enjoy it.
yeah, yeah,
Like, because the first several years of trimming a bonsai is still gonna look like a twig.
right,
Like,
right,
it's that time of it just takes so long to
Yeah.
do,
yeah,
and it's like, you don't do it for yourself.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, you do it for yourself, but like, as a way of meditation, of trimming things, but like, you're not gonna see what its full beauty is.
yeah, yeah.
It's for future people, future generations and future people,
Mhm.
the work
And
that we
she
do.
went into it thinking she was just gonna, go out there in the spring and clean out all the algae
Yeah,
and everything. be fine and, you know.
One and done.
Well, yeah, right,
Like,
right.
Yeah.
Well, it's also funny that she starts with like boots,
Uh-huh.
and then she like gets waders, and then it spills in, eventually she's, screw it. And then she just like jumps
Just like
in.
jumps in there.
Just like,
Yeah,
I'm
T-shirt.
just gonna jump in my t-shirts and shorts, and I'm just gonna take
Right,
this
right.
thing on.
Like
Right,
she was all in, she was committed and
Right,
better for it.
right. That's right. Yeah. Hmm.
the duck one though is funny, like, cause
Yeah.
she buys like 6 ducks and like,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
3 of them die within the first weekend.
Uh-huh. And then the rest of them leave the pond and like end up on her back porch, like.
Yeah, right, like cats,
Yeah. Yeah,
eating the cat food.
right, right, eating the cat food and pooping all over the back porch the whole time.
And the way she thought of dispatching them, I think.
Oh, yeah, she had dreams of visions of how she would take duck over to her neighbors for dinner. Oh, and I made connections with the Kentucky chapters too. Knowing some of the neighborhoods that she was talking about, some of those places and one of the early ones, right, about Witch Hazel, the neighbor.
Yeah, that was
Neighbor, they kind of,
That was the one told kind of through her daughter.
oh, that's right, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then when she was teaching, at the, liberal arts school, in Kentucky. And she took out all these, have you all made it to that part? She took out all these students, into the woods and, they were, they started saying, well, why are we doing this? And, we don't have to think about this stuff. This is all part of God's plan, right? We just
Oh,
have to
yeah,
just,
yeah.
just let it happen, right?
Right.
And, she gritted her teeth and kind of helped them to see a different perspective.
Right, like the girl that was dressed in the heels and the skirt.
Oh, right,
She
yeah,
was talking about
Yeah.
she wouldn't touch the dirt, but she,
yeah,
she helped her follow the squash
yeah.
stem,
Oh, right, yeah,
encouraging her to get into it.
That's when she was talking about ovaries and reproduction because
right.
the girl was dressed pretty provocative and
And she's like, gross, I can't eat, I used to like that squash, but I can't eat an ovary.
yeah,
That's the one, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of, back to answer your question from an hour ago, Chuck, a lot of religious imagery in it, in terms of her perspective of how this connection to nature makes us want to, she doesn't use the word, but makes us want to worship, right? Makes our lips want to sing and makes our heart want to just be still. There's a chapter about her going into the redwoods, and she and her hiking companion are just chattering along, and then they get to the redwoods, and there's nothing more to say. I call that worship. she doesn't use that language
Yes.
necessarily.
But yeah, I think she answers like the meaning of life, the
Mhm.
purpose of life, what our purpose is in the
Yeah,
world,
yeah,
and our,
right.
and our. What is it, our place
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah,
creation.
yeah.
That we are a part of it, and not above it.
Yeah, roots, putting down roots. That chapter where she talks about. Oh no, there's another one. There's another one about being indigenous. Becoming a part of, even though you're not native. What we're in the distinction now. It's like instead of you're not native, but you become a naturalized, is I think the phrase she uses. Saying this can be a experience of making this place your home, even though you weren't originally from here.
She talked about the creator, you said early in the book. What did she say about the creation?
Well, early on, she has this story about the mother,
Mother Earth
yeah, and Sky Woman.
and Sky Woman and her daughter, who is the one that gave us all of our plants, who died.
Oh, I will never see the strawberry as anything but the heartberry.
Yeah,
I know, I agree. I
that's the
agree.
first chapter. The first chapter is about the story of Sky Woman.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we talk about God created everything we have, and everything that's in the world. And I think that this ties in very well with the stewardship that God has given us from the very beginning in Genesis about taking care of. And I think this ties in so well to that,
Yeah,
about how we're supposed to be stewards of everything that we see and come in contact with, and where it came from and how it got to this point to what we're seeing or using or whatever.
no. Yeah,
So she explains God as Sky Woman.
No, Sky Woman is more of like also an atom.
yeah. Or even an Eve
Or
kind of a
yeah.
figure.
Yeah, I think she compares her to to Eve, how Eve was banished because she wasn't taken care of and has to fend for herself, whereas Mother Earth or Sky Woman cultivated the earth, and that's what we should be honoring.
Yeah, they're definitely not, it's not a
Mm-mm.
true match to the kind of the biblical
Yeah.
way of telling the story, but I see plenty of overlap, right? I see
Oh yeah.
a lot of overlap in terms of
It seems like she was, well, probably more than implying, but kind of saying that Eve's story is kind of problematic.
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
seemed like,
Mhm.
yeah, that she kind of starts with that first chapter of saying, don't get too settled in with your Christianese here.
right?
Richard Rohr says he's got about 10 creation scenarios, so
Oh, huh.
don't worry about it.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, even Genesis 1 and 2 are different, right? Just,
Sure.
even at the beginning, so. Well, and Job is a different take on the same idea.
Oh, there it is. Page 7.
Yeah, yeah,
Here. For tasting its fruit, he was banished from the garden.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, on one side of the world were people whose relationship with the living world was shaped by Sky Woman, who created a garden for the well-being of all. On the other side was another woman with a garden and a tree. That for tasting its fruit, she was banished from the garden and the gates clanged shut behind her.
Mhm.
Same species, same earth, different stories.
Yeah, I would dig a little deeper on the Genesis 3 interpretation than she does. And I would also, and I've tried to preach this sermon before too, I think a lot of times we think I preached before that we think we're Genesis 3 people, but we are Genesis 1 people. We were created with this other idea, right? And we just, it's representative of how we failed to be that
To be what we were
when we
intended
see
to be.
Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel and Noah and, these kind of failure stories.
Mhm.
Well.
I see many similarities between the worship that that Jesus tells us to do in this
Yeah.
book and how the indigenous people worship each other and creation. I see a lot of similarities. It's just worded differently.
Right. Well, I thought about too, how, Jesus kind of took took some of the basics, right? And talked about love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? He talked about this worship experience, and then love your neighbor as yourself, right? And it's just every other page in here is talking about that. And even Jesus' own connection. Where did he kind of recenter on these tenets when he went to the hills to pray? And so many stories that he tells that are about corn or about wheat or about some kind of a planting experience, farming experience. And so I think there is a lot of overlap. Like you're right, Dan.
Well, and just in taking care of and uplifting and honoring people as well as the living entities.
Yeah.
I think God tells us to do the same thing.
Yeah, before I read much of the book, I did that first sermon on Genesis 1 about, what are the tenets of what are God's characteristics? And I look back on those as like, yeah, that's a lot of the same overlap in terms of God making room and God, looking for partners and God, inviting rest alongside of our work and God being creative and so.
The left-hand side of the slide.
The left-hand slide from
Weekend,
Sunday's sermon,
yeah.
right.
Anything else?
And we got through a lot of it.
Yeah,
A lot of that 380 pages right there.
there's a lot more.
In an
about-
hour, still a lot more.
Still a lot more about, so there's a whole section of them deciding that they wanna make syrup.
All right, oh, I love that chapter, yes.
Which is good.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's several parts. Do you know what book we're reading next? I forgot to look it up.
It's actually on the website.
Oh,
I
cause it's what, 2 months out?
It's 2 or 3, I can't remember.
think it's October. There's an October one and then a December one, I
Yes.
believe, and the December one is on a Sunday.
So the
Yes.
October one is the 30th?
Um,
I should have.
I was thinking last Wednesday.
Here it is. It'll load. There we go. Okay, so October 30th, yes, you're right.
Okay,
Habitat Threshold by Craig Santos Perez.
hmm,
Oh, yes.
And it seems like that is, oh, okay, so the poem in Habitat Threshold is Love in a Time of Climate Change.
oh, okay. Oh, that's right, that's the poetic one. It's not prose, it's right, is it a lot of poems?
Did I put both on there?
Yeah, I
So
think,
there's a book of poems,
Mm-hmm,
and then in that there's a poem, and then I think another guy did.
oh, did a
okay,
prose,
Is
did a
that
thing on that.
how I interpreted it to put it on there? Let me make sure that that's. Let's look at the activities calendar.
Yeah, Habitat Threshold is the book of poems. And I think that there's one other. One of the poems, I think someone else revamped
Okay.
on it.
Okay,
Now that I'm,
The item on the activities calendar says love in a time of climate change and habitat threshold.
oh, okay.
okay, so
So
yeah,
I think
so,
that's just the way I ordered it. If that's not correct, let me know.
okay,
We will change it.
Yeah.
oh yes, so Love in a Time of Climate Change is a poem.
Book of poems, or a poem.
A poem
I think it's a
in,
poem in that book.
in the
Oh.
in habitat threshold.
And Habitat Threshold is a mostly poet or prose too? It's a book of
It's a
poems?
book of poems.
All
All
poems, okay.
poems. Okay,
Okay,
very good.
brilliant. And David, I look forward to hearing what you bring back from Nicaragua with some braiding sweetgrass mentality, right? I mean, 'cause,
Yeah,
I mean, you're looking at folks who, there's some indigenous farming and indigenous caring, I mean, healthcare, right? I mean, I think there's some,
yeah.
some
Well,
over-
it's the land that sustains them
Right,
where
right.
they're at.
Yeah.
And so they grow everything that they eat and,
Talk about farm
and,
to table, right? I mean,
yeah.
it's pretty serious.
It's not a luxury,
There's
it's
no
a
supermarket involved.
survival.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it is not a luxury, it's a survival. And you think about in this story and the people that she's talking about, that's in the beginning, that's what it was. It was survival.
Right.
Well, even when we came and started picking them out of their lands,
Yeah.
it truly was survival at that point. So,
I was just thinking about her talking about the difference in the buying things, like the attitude of buying things versus
Right,
just receiving it
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
land. And you know, it's free for everyone, just with reciprocity
Right.
is all that's
right,
required.
within the harvest rules, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and the students too. That was part of what was difficult for the students was going, for her daughter's students, I think it
Oh,
was.
okay, yeah.
That she worked with like at-risk kids
Oh, right,
or
right,
something
right,
like
right.
that. And they couldn't believe that the food was free,
Yeah,
that they were
yeah.
digging up. I don't know if you
Yeah.
read that part.
Yeah, so they still,
yeah, that's right.
yes, they still gave something as a, but that's, I mean, that whole idea is why when Europeans came, they were able to take it because they made contracts to say, the Westerners saying, yeah, can we have your land? And they're like, well, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I guess you
Right,
can, I'm
everyone
just signing
has
the
the
people.
land.
Like,
It's-
and then all of a sudden, next thing they
Yeah.
know, they're getting kicked off and like, what's
Yeah,
going on? You're like,
yeah.
yeah, you've signed this thing. It's like, I didn't know that,
Yeah,
Like,
right,
That
right,
was, that
that you
doesn't
were
mean
taking,
anything.
you
to
can't
me.
take what
Yeah.
wasn't, like, this isn't mine anyway.
right.
So like, no, this whole idea was, you know, is a
Yeah.
foreign, a completely
Mhm.
foreign concept.
Mhm.
Not just like the idea of contracts, but like the idea of like, why would you put a contract on? something
Possession
that
of
you-
land, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Right.
It doesn't belong to you in the first place.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, the next thing.
It belongs to
there-
everyone.
Stuff that like,
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. to me.
Right.
Next thing you know, they're, you know, getting kicked off to the dumpiest parts of the
Right,
country. Or
Multiple
to parts
times,
that like,
tourists.
right. Oh, yeah, because then they found oil underneath the dumpy part, and they're like, sorry, move along.
or not necessarily the dumpy part, but just a place that they didn't know how. Like they didn't know how to handle, because like they grew up in just this
Oh, yeah.
area
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
of the
They
United
knew
States.
the plants in this area and how to
Yeah.
hunt in this area
And
and how to
how-
fish, and all of a
Right.
sudden they're in
And they're
A
in a
completely different.
Oklahoma.
completely
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
biosystem,
Yeah.
And they called them, and they're called stupid because they didn't know how.
right?
Yeah, her line about the first Europeans said the native farmers were done, they don't know how to do it, and then they sure ate their food and came back for more, and then came back for more. It didn't stop coming back. Great, good book,
Okay.
good book. Thank you.
Yeah.
Kathy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, I'm gonna leave. I got lots of work to do yet before I leave town.
Thanks for joining
Okay.
us, David.
Thanks for joining.
Glad you were
Safe
here.
travels.
Yeah, thank you. See y'all in a few weeks.
All right,
Yep.
See ya.
yeah,
When did she leave?
Friday.
Friday.
Kissing off from weed,
2
right?
days from now.
Okay,
Thanks
any
for
final
letting me
words
show
before
up.
we close our thing? All right,